Children, let's think about the words as we sing Rescue the Perishing, 671. Rescue the perishing, care for the dying, snatch them in pity from sin and the grave. Weep for the erring one, lift up the fallen, tell them of Jesus the mighty to save. Rescue the perishing, care for the dying, Jesus is merciful, Jesus will save. Just the ladies on the second. Lord. Rescue the perishing. We are ready.
All right, good to see each of you in the house of God tonight. We continue these meetings on the subject of keeping the kids. We've covered a lot of ground since we started yesterday morning, and we looked at the battle, the fierceness of the battle. We answered the question, asked the question, can we keep the kids? And we looked at the matter of making this a priority, major priority. And then we've been looking at the issue of salvation for quite some time. We've spent a lot of time on the issue of salvation and expecting a genuine born-again conversion experience in our children's lives. And now we want to move to the subject of the home. The home. And I want to repeat what we said in the introduction to this series, and that is keeping the kids is not a matter of religion or psychology or humanistic principles, It is not building self-esteem. It's not of the world. It's not anything of the world. We're talking about something supernatural and not something of man. We can't do this. We can't do this. God can do this through us, but we can't do this. And if you think you can do this, you will get discouraged. And I'm talking about the Christian life. You can't do it. You cannot live the Christian life. You've got to be saved, and Christ must live in you, through you, that life, that new life. You cannot live the Christian life. It is Christ in me. It is not me. Christ liveth in me, Galatians 2:20, not I, but Christ liveth in me. You cannot live the Christian life. It is miles beyond anything man can do. Miles. It is, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. That's not the power of positive confession, which the world believes. This is God. It's 100% God. We cannot raise our children for Christ and see them turn out successfully. We can't do that. But God can do that, and we are the instruments in which He wants to do that. It is God's workmanship. All of this is God's workmanship. We're very familiar with Ephesians 2:8 and 9. By grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. But the very next verse says, For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. We are his workmanship. The new life, everything about it is God's. God's plan, God's work, God's wisdom, everything. We cannot do this. God can do this through us. Amen. Therefore, we can do this. But only if we understand that it's 100% God. This is very important. Amen. And so we're looking at the home. People say, it's just so hard. Well, then you're trying to do it. Then you're trying to do it. I'm not saying there's nothing hard here. But if it's just hard, you're trying to do it. Something's wrong. It shouldn't be like that. Paul never had any kind of, it's just too hard, Lord. I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. Those aren't just words, that's reality. And coming to understanding of the reality if you're saved. And if you're not saved, it's not a reality. You can't do it. It's 100% of God. All of these things are 100% of God. Everything about the church is 100% God. And so we're going to look at the home, the essential role of the home in keeping the kids, the spiritual atmosphere of the home, which is not in your books. Some of this, as I said, is not there yet. The path of holiness and spiritual victory as the necessary elements of the homes that we need. Glaring inconsistencies, the danger of glaring inconsistencies, and young people can't blame their sin on others again. The home. As we said in the beginning, the fundamental thing about keeping the kids is that there must be the right kind of church and then the right kind of home, as those two divine institutions are intended to work together. So that the church, which is the pillar and ground of the truth, builds up the home. All the major passages about the home, the Christian home, are addressed in the epistles to the churches. like Ephesians 5 and Colossians chapter 3 and Titus chapter 2. Those are major passages on what kind of Christian homes we should have, how to build our Christian homes, the mother, the father, the children, and they're addressed to the churches. So it is the church's business to take that instruction and build up the homes, and then the homes do what God has told them to do in raising a godly seed, Malachi chapter 2, and then that godly home builds up the church. It's very beautiful. And it's not real complicated, so that ordinary people can understand. God has not made his things real complicated, because it's ordinary people that he usually saves, that usually get saved, as we read in 1 Corinthians. But we must have the right homes. We must have the right homes. We must have the right homes. Well, I take them to church. It's not enough. It won't work. Maybe one time out of some. It doesn't work. History tells us it doesn't work. Look around the churches, it tells you it doesn't work. But I take them to church. It's not enough. We must have the right homes. The right homes and products of strong churches. But we must understand also there's a lot of confusion about this today, that the home is not the church. And the church is not the home. They are two distinct divine institutions that are intended to work together today. Some years ago, there's a lot of confusion about this. There's homes that think they're churches. And there's a whole movement like that. Home church. Well, there's nothing wrong with the church meeting in a home. That's all they did at first. The church in the home of this and that, as we read in Romans chapter 16 and other places. But that's a church meeting in a home. But a home church concept today, that's a whole different thing. That's the idea that the church is the home. The home is the church. That the father's the pastor. Years ago, I was in Australia and had a Bible conference. And that started on a Sunday morning. And that Sunday morning, there was a very sharp, large homeschooling family there. And the young people, the children and teenagers of that family participated in the music ministry that Sunday morning, and they were sharp, and they played their instruments well, and it was impressive. And then that night I noticed they weren't back. And then Monday night they weren't back, and so I asked the pastor somewhere along the line, where's that family that was there Sunday morning? He said, oh, they only come on Sunday morning. The rest of the time they have family business. Well, they wouldn't be members of my church. I don't know why they were members there, but anyway, they were, somehow or other, because they're confused. The home is essential, but it's not the church. It's not the pillar and ground of the truth. It's not the house of God. It's never called that. And the father has an essential role as the spiritual head of the home, but he's not a pastor unless he's called to be a pastor and qualified. It's a whole different thing. We have to have biblically organized churches. And just some Christians meeting together, praying together, whatever, is not a church. And we know that for sure from the book of Titus. And the book of Titus was written to instruct Titus how to organize proper New Testament churches on the Isle of Crete. But it's written for every place of every time. And the very first thing that Titus was to do was ordain elders in the churches. And without biblically qualified elders, you don't have a New Testament church, no matter what else you have. You still don't have that. There has to be proper biblical organization. And so I wanted to say that as we get started today, because there's a lot of confusion. Bill Gothard, the Institute of Basic Youth Conflicts, promoted that idea and still does, although Bill Gothard is not a part of that now, out of the ministry. And I would hasten to say that a large percentage of churches are so weak and worldly, and it's so sad to have to say this, but it's true, that they hinder a good family. If you have a good family, that so many churches are so weak and worldly that they hinder the family. Pull it down. And that's a big problem. I have no sympathy with such churches. I don't care. I don't believe they're true churches. If a church is not holy and not a pilgrim church, if they're worldly, it's not a true church. How could it be? Jesus wrote to the 7 churches of that day, and he chose, with divine wisdom, 7 churches to illustrate. I believe any church can find itself somewhere in those 7 churches. But it's strong stuff. Jesus said to the church at Ephesus, you've left your first love. Therefore, if you don't change this business, I'm going to remove your candlestick. That means you're not going to be my church. Right. Now, if he did that just because a church left its first love, what about a church that never even had it? I'm saying Jesus has not changed it a bit. The same yesterday, today, and forever. So these things tell us what Jesus is and how he thinks. Not looking around the churches, going to the Bible. Amen. And seeing what's there. And if you do that, you won't be shocked at the judgment of God or the judgment seat of Christ. Because we can already see how God thinks and how God acts. Shouldn't be any surprises. And he said to the church of Laodicea, because you're lukewarm, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Well, Jesus hasn't changed. And so most churches, I'm talking about fundamental Baptist churches, vast majority, I believe, would fit the lukewarm category. They would say, well, we're not cold. I mean, we believe something right. We still got this and that. You know, we still use a hymn book, even. Whatever. Yeah, but you're dead as a doornail. Look at your kids. They're all worldly, and they live on wicked social media and play the video games all week, and you call yourself a church? Why hasn't Jesus spewed you out of his mouth? That's my question. Well, I think he has. He hasn't changed. I have no sympathy with that. We see it in Scripture. Friend was responding to my question about I asked him how many young people in your church, are on fire for the Lord. This is one of the better churches. This would be one of the better independent Baptist churches in America. How many of the young people in your church are on fire for the Lord? They claim to be saved. These teenagers in this independent Baptist church. He said a few of the young people are pretty serious. Most not. Pastor preaches hard. The parents are failing their kids by not following through on what they're hearing. This is one of the best churches I know of. The key is the home, he says. They're getting the right stuff from the pulpit. Those who put into practice what they hear being preached have been pretty successful with the kids. Those that don't have failed miserably. Well, it comes back to the home. Well, we have to have the right preaching, right kind of church, but then, even then, comes back to the home. Both. Not one or the other, both. We can keep the kids, but there's a lot to it. A majority of the responses to our surveys, both in 2010 and also this year again, of how to keep the kids, a large majority mentioned the home. For example, just a few, you have them in your book, lots of them. I would suggest that an unhealthy family is the biggest predicator that the kids will drop out of church after graduation. Biggest predictor. Another one, I believe that consistency in the lives of parents in personal separation from the world and holiness of life 7 days a week, 365 days a year, would be the greatest influence. If a child knows that his parent is not just a Sunday Christian, but a genuine, God-fearing, consistent believer, that child will more likely want to grow up to be godly as well and not just religious. Another wrote, my dad was a deacon in an independent fundamental Baptist church that was a strong church. I am a strong preacher of personal responsibility, and I am fully responsible for my wayward years. But sitting and watching Cheers with my deacon dad, laughing at Sam and Norm and Cliff sit around the bar, talking and drinking and chasing Diane, surely didn't help convince me that it was bad. Being a deacon, our family would go other deacons' houses, and what happened at my house was the norm in that independent fundamental Baptist circle. They'd all watch the good Hollywood movies like Superman, Christopher Reeve, and some using the Lord's name in vain, some swear words, Superman kissing affectionately a woman, not his wife, not even his girlfriend. The adults watch it innocently and chuckle, but the kids see right through the charade and are able to discern that this is directly against the things they show me in the Bible on Sundays. The deacons and their wives are not able to discern this same thing, so the kid can only conclude, I must be wrong, this can't be that bad. We're talking about homes, what we do all week, when we're tired, what we do. The parents, another one. The parents in the home need to be setting the standards. And what is said in church should only be confirmation to the hearts of the children that what their parents are teaching them is right. Another one. For the parents, the important thing is their personal walk with God. I remember the first time I ever saw my dad cry was in family devotions when he was praying for his dad's salvation. That made an indelible impression on my life. Children are going to see our imperfections and inconsistencies, but by the same token, if the children see what we are trying, that we're trying, they respect someone who's making the effort to walk with God. Another one, the parents need to be faithful in all things. When these kids see mom and daddy laying out on Sunday and Wednesday, for various reasons, they don't see the importance of faithfulness. Indeed. Another one, the first thing that comes to mind when addressing this issue is the spiritual condition of the home. So again and again, they're hammering this. People see this, people know this. The spiritual condition of the home. The spiritual condition of the home. Confusion reigns when the young people are bombarded from the outside by all the worldliness. They need a strong home front for godliness, and they aren't getting it. And many others are there. Many others are there along exactly that same theme. Very observant comments here. Wise. And so the first qualification for a home that produces a godly seed is consistent Christian living. Consistent Christian living. And when you sin, you confess your sin. If need be, before your kids. Just consistent Christian living. Proverbs 23:26 says, my son, give me thine heart, let thine eyes observe my ways. There's a connection between keeping the child's heart and them seeing real Christianity in you. My son, give me thine heart. Why should I, Dad? Let thine eyes observe my ways. Because, son, you know I'm living for Christ. And when I fail, I confess that. And I'm not trying to play any games here or pretend any perfection, but son, you know me. You know I'm living for Christ. So give me your heart. It's been said that the church or school will never resurrect what the home puts to death. I'll send them to Christian school. Okay. Multitudes of kids have graduated from Christian schools as reprobate as you can possibly imagine and become as reprobate. Multitudes. Multitudes. Send them to Christian school. Send them to church. So one of the chief reasons why young people leave church is the hypocrisy of adults. When adults don't take their relationship with Christ seriously and live consistent Christian lives, the children grow up thinking that Christianity is a sham. Why would they not think that? Pastor Mike Allison, Madison Baptist Church in Huntsville, Alabama. He's an old-timer in the ministry, a man that is still standing in the same place he stood 40 years ago or whatever. It's very rare. But a lot of experience. He's seen a lot of children grow up in seemingly good homes and good churches and go out into the world. He's seen a lot of it. And he identifies, in my conversation with him some years ago, he identifies the chief culprit as hypocrisy and lukewarmness in the home. I tell the parents in the Christian school when we have our meeting at the beginning of the year, Christian school, good Christian school. If you put a child from a lukewarm Christian home into a red-hot Christian school, you will raise a rebel. That's what he says. Lots of experience. Not just something he set off to fly here. If you put a child from a lukewarm Christian home, that would be your home, into a red-hot Christian school, you will raise a rebel. That's how important the home is. I'll send them to good school. Well, that's great. But what's the home? Does it back up the school and the church? It must. This is life or death. He said, we have a better chance with a child from a totally lost home where the parents definitely want this and they're going to submit to the school's rules and stuff, than we do with a child from a lukewarm Christian home. As much as we preach against the movie theaters, they come in talking about the latest movie, and you think to yourself, we're wasting our time. They don't have filtered internet. They allow the TV and stuff like HBO, Showtime. Kids get up in the middle of the night and watch the stuff when the parents are asleep. We've dealt with all of that in the past, and of course we find out about these things and we have to do some kind of discipline, and that makes us the bad guys. And when the parent sides with the child, they have lost that child. But that's normally what happens. They side with that child against the authority, the biblical authority. Well, that is a recipe to lose your child to the world. And so the home, the home. Pastor Bobby Mitchell, Midcoast Baptist Church in Brunswick, Maine, out on the coast of Maine, beautiful Maine. Many grow up in homes that are plagued with inconsistency. He's been in the ministry many years, and he's the son of a pastor, grew up in a pastor's home. He and his father started this Midcoast Baptist Church. They started it as a father-son team. It worked very well. He said the standards change based on who the family's around. The family Bible time is hit and miss or non-existent. Discipline's not consistent. There's an open, perhaps silent disagreement with what is taught by the church concerning entertainment, dress, roles in the home, etc. The inconsistency relates to young people that the parents are not really set on doing things the biblical way. It's teaching the young people that. They get that message. They become unstable and are easy prey for the world. And Pastor Terry Coomer says much the same thing. He said, so many parents do not have a real relationship with the Lord. They're not spending time in the Word, meditating on God's Word and having God speak to them. They do not know how to respond and have an intimate, personal, passionate relationship with the Lord. Obviously, if they are not, the children are not. And so the same kind of message. He said most independent Baptist people, in his perspective, are living for the lust of the flesh, and they do not know how to not to do so. They have demand lust. Demand lust. Lust that control their behavior. That lust demands, and you go with it, and you've got a habit of going with it, responding to it. That lust is demanding, I fulfill it. Demand lust. And they do not know how to deal with them biblically. He quotes Ephesians 2, 22 through 24, putting off the old man, putting on the new man. He's talking about parents that don't know how to live for Christ. They're following their lust. Man, that social media is calling me. I've got to respond. I got to go over there. I know it's there, but I got to go turn it on. Demand lust and the habit of responding to it, whatever it is. That's what he's talking about. This leads to destruction in their lives and in the lives of the children. Pastor David Sorensen. These are men I interviewed as we prepared this book the first time. He said, 20 years ago, I had the privilege of working with the youth of the church. Later, I worked with the young couples. This is a unique perspective here, experience. At the same time, my wife and I worked together in the large children's church program. Then we started a Christian school. Again, I worked with families and their children. It was a unique experience. I came to know the younger children in the children's church. I also knew the teenagers, having been the youth pastor for several years. In working with the young couples of the church, I got to know the parents of many of these same young people. This is what he saw. Spirituality and character in the children and teenagers closely paralleled the degree of spiritual maturity and character evident in the parents. Well, that's not rocket science. Just about anybody can observe that. But what about you? We're talking about homes. We're talking about the future of this church. We're talking about the future of your own children. And we can keep the kids. We started out with the encouraging promises of God and the words of God that we can. We're not left without resources. But it's no small thing. We're going to have to deal with our homes. If there is glaring things there, we've got to deal with them. Amen. Life or death, possibly life or death for our kids. There's demand lust. He said, I came to learn that when the Bible spoke about reaping what we sow in Galatians 6, it likely had the application to our offspring. Reaping what we sow. Our offspring. Well, I'll just let down the guard, I know I'm sinning, but my lust is demanding it. Well, there's a price. We sow what we see. Reap what we sow. He said, I observed that in all these experiences, working with parents and young people and children. How we, David Sorensen is talking still, how we as parents live spiritually will profoundly affect our children. Profoundly. Yes, but we need to listen to this. Children and teenagers are very perceptive of inconsistency and hypocrisy. Very perceptive. Perhaps because they're required to be under authority, they subconsciously scrutinize those over them. The sowing to the flesh brings a harvest of corruption, and children tend to gravitate to the lowest common denominator spiritually in our home. And that's observable. Here's a man with a lot of experience giving his personal observations in these things, which helps us. We've got to deal with the spiritual atmosphere of the home. It comes back to a spiritual atmosphere in the home. What is the atmosphere? You're going to go home tonight. You're going to be home. Normally you'll be home, and until, just a couple times in the week you come to church. The spiritual atmosphere of the home. What is it? But that's going to be the win or lose area. That spiritual atmosphere of the home. It'll determine the product of the home. That's what Dr. Sorensen was saying, and that's the observation of multitudes of godly Christians. If there's a godly atmosphere in the home, talking about the atmosphere of the home, if there's a godly atmosphere, there will be godly fruit. If there's a fleshly, worldly atmosphere, there will be carnal fruit. And so there must be a commitment by parents to have a godly atmosphere in the home by submission to God's Spirit and to deal with anything that would corrupt it. Guarding my home. Because we've got to have a godly atmosphere. Amen. It's going to affect the children one way or the other. Two major scripture verses that describe two atmospheres. Look at Galatians 5, 19 through 23. Here's two atmospheres. Galatians 5, 19 through 23. Two atmospheres. What's yours? Let's take a test. Galatians 5, 19 through 23. This is supernatural stuff. This is not religion. Religion won't help you here. This is supernatural. This is born-again salvation and spirit-filled living. Supernatural. True Christianity, which the world today knows almost nothing about. Galatians 5, 19 through 23. Spiritual climate, atmosphere of the home. Now, the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these. So here's the works of the flesh. The old man. Adultery. How about pornography? Adultery. Pornography is adultery. Fornication. Uncleanness. Lasciviousness. Notice that all the first ones here have to do with sexual sins. That's where it starts here, because that's the most powerful of the sins. So this list starts there. And we live in a pornographic society with little kids watching pornography. And, idolatry. Witchcraft. Hatred in a Christian home. Can be hatred, because that's a lust of the flesh, and the old flesh is there. When you get saved, the flesh doesn't go away. The old man, the flesh, it's the same thing, is there, and you can follow the flesh or the new man, the spirit, the flesh of the spirit, new man or the old man. So Christian homes can have these things. He's writing to Christians. hatred, variance. The husband and the wife at variance instead of at harmony. Variance. A home full of variance. That's a troubled home. Makes you want to run away. The home I grew up in, so much variance. And I did run away. Emulations, jealousies, wrath, strife. These are all sort of the same thing, but different words, and it's all nasty stuff, but it's all works of the flesh. And none of us can say we don't know anything about any of this. We do. We do know, and can live like this. Now, living like this might mean you're lost, but not necessarily. Because he's writing to Christians that he believes are born again and urging them to walk not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. Seditions, heresies. Heresies. There are two great dangers on the internet, and that is sexual dangers, but then the danger of heresy, false teaching, and great dangers for our kids, for ourselves. Great dangers. Envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like. It's not the end of the list. Such like. Of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. If this is how you live, then you're not saved. But these things are there even in the old man and can be acted out. But if you live like this, if this is your life, you're not saved, Paul is saying. But then he immediately says, but the fruit of the Spirit. And so two atmospheres. That's the first atmosphere. Anger, variance, lust, sexual lust. Sounds like a Hollywood movie. Or mostly what's on social media. There it is right there. How did he know? But the fruit of the Spirit, here's another atmosphere, is love. A home filled with love. Joy. Joy is the fruit of the Spirit. Peace. Peaceful home. Long-suffering. Long-suffering, patient home. Gentleness. A gentle home. What a great home. Goodness. A home filled with goodness. Faith. A home filled with faith. Oh, we don't know what's going to happen to us. There's a new bill. Really? Where's the faith? Meekness. A home of meekness. That's the opposite of pride. Temperance. That is keeping your control of yourself. Keeping control of yourself. When you're drunk, you're not in control of yourself. When you're watching pornography, you're not in control of yourself. Temperance. Against such, there is no law. And so there's two atmospheres. We're applying this to the home. Which one do we have is the question. And if it's not in the category of the Spirit, we've got to do something about it. Life or death. Well, I'll just go home and let it out. Well, you're going to destroy your kids. And that's all there is to it. I mean, there are some rare exceptions. But pretty much, you live in the flesh and let flesh control your home, you're probably going to destroy your kids. And so we've got to do something. It's life or death. We've got to focus on this thing God, if we're saved, if we're not saved, we need to get saved. If we are saved, we must walk in the Spirit. We can walk in the Spirit, but we must walk in the Spirit so that the Spirit controls our homes. And I know multitudes of homes on both categories, Christian homes. Here's another one, James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. Two atmospheres. The atmosphere of the home. James chapter 3, beginning in verse 13. Two atmospheres. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with the meekness of wisdom. But, now here's the first one. But if you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not. Lie not against the truth. Don't justify that. Well, that's just the way I am. And that's the way my mama was too. Don't justify it. Lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. That's what it is. We need to admit it wherever it raises its head and deal with it. Not make any justification for it whatsoever. Well, I'm just tired when I come home. No, it's earthly, sensual, devilish. Admit it, deal with it. What? Bitter envying and strife. I come home and suddenly there's strife. Something's wrong. Deal with it. For where envying and strife is, there's confusion and every evil work. That's one kind of home. Know any homes like that? Here's another one. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure. Pure, morally pure. First pure. The first thing that was listed in the list of the flesh was impurities. And so here, the first fruit of wisdom from above is purity. I'm not going to watch that. We're not going to watch that. Get that out of here. We should be shocked at anything that's wrong. But if you watch it a little bit, something wrong, and then you'll watch a little more. First, pure. The way women dress on any television program or movie is not pure. A woman with super tight clothes might as well be naked as far as a man goes. I don't know if you know that, but that's true. I think women do know that, by the way. Because real tight couldn't be very comfortable. There's no modesty. There's no modesty. We know there's no modesty. I don't care if it's G-rated. There's no modesty there. It's not pure. It doesn't cause pure thinking. We know that. We know that. But we watch. Because we like it. Then we watch a little more. That's the way it works. But it's first pure, then peaceable, a peaceable atmosphere. That's wonderful. Peaceable atmosphere. In the home. No fussing. No yelling. No smashing your fist through the wall. No slamming the door and going out. Peaceable. Gentle. Gentle. That's beautiful. Christ is gentle. Easy to be entreated. Oh, get away from me. I'm tired. I don't want to bother with it. But no, easy to be entreated. Easy to be. God wants us to entreat him. Godly parents want their kids to entreat them. They'll give them some time. Easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good works. This is a beautiful home. Full of mercy. We're sinners. Parents are sinners. Kids are sinners. Got to be a lot of mercy. Good fruits, without partiality. Not treating the kids differently. Without partiality, without hypocrisy. This is a beautiful home. The fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. Two atmospheres of Christian homes. We'll stop there. The break.